Hi everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to review piecewise functions. So if you remember from Algebra 2 or Pre-Calc, a piecewise function is a function made up of pieces of functions. So if you take a look at this as a graph of f of x and this is the graph of g of x, you can see from learning your parent functions yesterday that this is part of a quadratic. And these two pieces are pieces of lines. This is a piece of a line, and this almost looks like a piece of a square root function. So these are two examples of what piecewise functions look like. So now let's take a look and answer the questions. So what parent functions do you see in the piecewise functions above? Well, we already answered that. So in this one, we have a quadratic, and we have two linears functions. Right, so one quadratic and two linear. How about the graph of g of x? We have one linear function and we have one square root function. Maybe it looks like it's been shifted a little bit, but just to recap, here's my quadratic, my two lines, here's my line, and here's my square root. So now I want to ask you to evaluate some things. So the first one that I want you to evaluate is f of -1. So just to remember, I'm just going to move this up a bit. It's coming from f of x, right? So if x is inside the parentheses, right, then I'm looking for x to be -1, and then I want to find the y. So let's look over here. When x is -1, what is the y? Right up here, right? So this point, my y value there is 1. So again, we're looking for the y value when x is inside the parentheses. So x here is +1 now. So we're going to go over to +1 and we're going to look up to the graph and we've got this point right here. It's a closed circle here. Now some of you may be thinking, well look, there's an open circle here, so which one do I choose? We always choose the closed circles because these open circles are undefined values. So if you want to write undefined at all the opens, you can. So they are not included. Therefore, we still look at that same y value, which is 1. So next, it looks like I am asking you to find f of 2. So let's look at our picture one more time. So here's my y value of 2. And I've got two choices. This one's undefined, we can't choose it, so we're going to have to choose this one up here, which is a y value of 3. And last but not least, I'm asking you to tell me for what values of x does f of x equal 3? Remember, f of x is the same thing as saying y equals. So I'm asking you for what values of x does y equal 3? So let's take a look and see. So here is y equaling 3, and I want to know what x values correspond to it. So we've got, I'll actually highlight it here in red, we've got this value, this x value, and we've got these x values here. So if you take a look at those x values, the first one looks like it's approximately -1.75. Now we can estimate that. That's entirely okay. So we'll make this x equals -1.75. And then I'm going to put a little bracket around it, just proper notation. I'm going to put a comma. And now I want to represent all of the x values that could possibly be here. So from 1 to 2, but undefined at 1 and defined at 2. So it's not just 1 and 2, it's 1, 1.5, 1.7, 1.8, all of these numbers in here. So from 1 to 2, the way we write that is from 1 to 2 with x in the middle and a less than symbol in both, except the less than around the 2 will get a line under it because it's less than or equal to, because that's your closed circle. This one is your open circle. All right, why don't you take a couple minutes to evaluate these four using the graph of above. I think I made this one g of x. Yep. So using the graph of g of x, can you find all of these values? You can pause the video to try them and then hit resume when you're ready for the answers. Okay, here they are. All right, if you have any questions on these, please make sure you ask me in class tomorrow. All right, now I'd like to go over how to graph a piecewise function. So you've got these 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces with these 4 stipulations. So I'm going to ask you to take out your calculators and we're going to put them all in separately. So we've got y equals the absolute value of 2x plus 7. Then we've got y equals 1 plus x squared. Then we've got y equals 6, and we've got y equals 1/3 x plus 8. So here's your f of x, and it branches off into these 4. So it's y equals this, y equals this, y equals this, y equals this, right? So I'd like you to put all 4 of these into the calculator, maybe one at a time. So if we want to put this one in, but notice I only want it for when x is less than or equal to -4. So what that means is I only want to calculate or plot values that are less than or equal to -4. So -4, -5, -6, -7, -8, so on and so on. And be careful at this -4, since there's a line underneath, that means we're getting a closed circle here. All right. Now, if we just want to go forward with the next one, x and y, I only want you to give me the graph from -4 to 1. But notice around the 1 there's a line, and by the 4, -4, there is no line. So what you're going to do here is I want -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, and 1. But around the -4 you get an open circle because there's no line under it, and by the 1 you're going to put a closed circle, so that helps as well. Now keep going. We want y equals 6, but I want it from 1 to 3 with no lines, so they're both open. So 1, 2, and 3, but the endpoints are opened and open. And then this one, I want x and y, I want the values here. And I want them for when x is greater than or equal to 3. So we want 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as many as we want to graph. But except since there's a line around the 3, we're going to put a closed circle. So what I'd like you to do now is actually go to your y equals and get me these specific values that belong in each of these 4 graphs. If you're having trouble finding the square absolute value, you want to hit math, scroll over to number, and it's the first choice. It should say ABS. Okay, so take a couple minutes and do that. Pause the video and then hit resume when you're ready for the answers. All right, here are your answers. All right, so take a look at them and see if you got the same numbers. And you'll notice about this last one is these were all decimals, so I didn't really feel like graphing them, only because it's a line and all you really need are 2 points. So I'm going to graph 3, 9 and 6, 7. I'm sorry, 6, 10, because that's really all I need. All right, so why don't we do one at a time? Why don't you take a minute, graph this, and then hit resume to check your answer. Then graph this, hit resume to check your answer, and so on and so on. All right, so here's your answer for the first one. So a couple things to notice. I drew an arrow at the end because it was all values less than -4, and I put a closed circle here at -4, 1. All right, here's your answer for the second part. Just a couple of things to notice. At -4, I went up to 17. It wasn't there, so I just kind of graphed it. Made sure I put an open circle and then a closed circle at 1. So 1, 2. All right, here's your answer for the third graph. A couple things to point out is at 1 and 3, we have open circles, and then it's connected all the way through. All right, here's your answer for the fourth graph. Just a couple things to notice. At 3, we have a closed circle, and I have an arrow pointing to the right of the graph because this is for all values greater than or equal to 3. So here is a graph of your piecewise function. If you have any questions, please now is a good time to jot them down and make sure you ask us in class tomorrow. All right, have a good night.